are peaceful and lovely and amazing, but if 10% wants to bring down the West, you're looking at a heck of a lot of people. You're looking at like 200 million people.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've stumbled across this video from Piers Morgan Uncensored, where he's got a massive panel debate about the tragic Bondi Beach terror attack in Australia. You've got Cenk Uygur, Wajahat Ali, Jillian Michaels, Emily Austin, and Roland Martin all going at it over immigration, assimilation, and whether we can even have honest conversations about radical extremism anymore. And what starts as a discussion about terrorism quickly turns into Jillian Michaels bringing up real statistics about global terror attacks, and then Wajahat completely loses it and starts calling her a white nationalist on live television, which he then can't back up. So make sure you watch until the end, because this gets absolutely wild. And please comment down below where you're watching from. I really love to see people from all over the world connecting in here. All right now, let's get into the video.
There were many attacks going on Jewish people before October the 7th, all right? So let's be clear about that. This has been a rising problem of anti-Semitism across the world, and there are not many Jewish people in the world. There are 1.6 billion Muslims. There are 15 million Jews, right? Let's just put the numbers on the table, okay? And like I said to Emily, it must be a scary time to be a Jewish person right now when even celebrating Hanukkah on a beach in Sydney, I've been to that beach, Bondi Beach. It's one of the most fun, positive, entertaining places to be anywhere in the world. The sun always shines, the families always play. And then suddenly, utter carnage with a father and son dressed like paramilitaries, just using shotguns to cold-bloodedly murder a Holocaust survivor, a 10-year-old girl, and so on. So let's just start by calling out how despicable this was on every level, and yet how typical of ISIS and groups like it, the radicalized Islamist extremists who've been doing this for a long time. For the last 20 years, they've been doing this stuff. And it's a horrible throwback to that. So yes, we can talk about the war, and it's not irrelevant, but I do think we need to put this in some perspective, which is these kind of attacks on Jewish people were going on way before the war started.
Can I address a few of the things that you said previously?
Yeah.
I don't think the alarm is about Muslims migrating to America. I think the alarm is about assimilation. I don't think that these two individuals in Bondi represent what I've been told is actually 2 billion Muslims. But when I talk to people, and I've really been trying to understand and explore this issue, whether it's Gad Saad or it's Patrick Bet-David, when I talk to people, they'll tell you, yeah, let's say 90%. And I've looked at Pew Research, I've looked at the Global Terror Database. That's a conservative number, right? 90% of Muslims are peaceful and lovely and amazing. But if 10% wants to bring down the West, you're looking at a heck of a lot of people. You're looking at like 200 million people. So what do you do about that? And yes, there are amazing heroes like the man who tried to stop them. But guys, when you look at the fact that there have been 64,000 terror attacks since 9/11 that were committed by radical Islam, 243,000 people died in those terror attacks. And you're saying all religions, I mean, not really. I've started to read the Quran, and there's a duality there, unquestionably, but there's a lot in there about, kill and subjugate the infidels. So, Cenk, you're a good faith actor. I think.
Have you ever read the Old Testament?
I'm being honest with you.
Have you ever read the Old Testament? It's about slaughtering
Cenk,
all the other tribes. And in fact,
no
Netanyahu quotes it and says, "Kill, do like we did to the Amalekites, kill their women and children." There are sick religious fundamentalists, and unfortunately, they're Jewish settlers and the Israeli government. They're the sickest extremists in religion on the whole planet.
And I understand you. I understand Gaza, okay? And I see both sides of that, absolutely. And you've made great points to me, and I've listened to you, and I've changed my position on how I feel that the Israeli government has behaved over there. But what I'm trying to tell you simply is that when people are Islamophobic, as I've explored this, I do think they are. And what I think they're afraid of is an ideology that is not in alignment with the West. And it's not the vast majority of Muslims. But when it's, let's say, 10%, it's still a lot of people. These are statistics.
Okay, let me bring in Mujahid. Let me hang on.
That's an outrageous number.
Let me bring in Mujahid to respond.
Research let me bring in Mujahid.
Let me bring in Mujahid to respond to that. Mujahid.
Right.
Ahmed al-Ahmed is a 43-year-old Muslim fruit vendor who, unarmed, decided to bum rush one of the terrorists, disarmed him, took the gun while he was being shot at. Was shot twice. I didn't realize this at first when I saw that amazing video, but then I later saw that he was shot twice. He held off the other shooter, and he saved lives. In Germany, in March, there was a deranged Saudi national who, by the way, became radicalized by AfD and this type of white nationalism and ended up hating Islam. He rammed a truck in a terrorist attack through a crowd. You know who stopped him? A Pakistani Muslim cab driver in Germany stopped him. When there was...
Okay, so this is the moment right here. Piers finally brings in Jillian after she's been sitting there watching everyone else scream at each other about Gaza and ideology and everything else. And notice what she does immediately. She doesn't start yelling. She doesn't start calling people names. She goes straight to the actual issue that everyone keeps dancing around. When Jillian says the alarm is about assimilation, not about Muslims migrating to America, that is the nuance that gets lost in every single one of these conversations. And this is what drives me crazy about these panels, because the moment someone tries to make a distinction, the moment someone tries to separate the ideology from the people, they get accused of bigotry. But watch what she does here. She literally starts by saying 90% of Muslims are peaceful and lovely and amazing. She leads with that, and then she does basic math. If 10% of 2 billion people want to bring down Western civilization, you are looking at 200 million people. That is not Islamophobia. That is arithmetic. That is looking at global terrorism statistics and asking a legitimate question about how we protect open societies. And here is where it gets really important. Jillian brings up the 64,000 terror attacks since September 11th committed by radical extremists from this ideology. 243,000 people died in those attacks. Those are not made-up numbers. Those are documented by organizations that track global terrorism. The Global Terrorism Database exists for this exact reason. Now, I want you to understand something about how these conversations usually go. When someone on the conservative side brings up statistics like this, they immediately get shut down. They get told they are fear-mongering, or that they are being divisive, or that they are cherry-picking data. But what is the alternative? Are we supposed to just not talk about patterns? Are we supposed to ignore 25 years of documented evidence because it might make someone uncomfortable? This is what Jillian is trying to get at when she talks about the duality in certain religious texts. She is not saying every single person who follows that faith is dangerous. She is saying there is a theological component to this violence that we have to be able to discuss. And when she mentions reading the text herself and finding calls to subjugate non-believers, she is not making that up. Those passages exist. Scholars debate their interpretation, but the words are there. The question she is asking is actually really straightforward. What do you do about that? How do you screen for ideology when someone wants to immigrate? How do you separate people who want to integrate into Western society from people who want to fundamentally change it? And before anyone says that is impossible, we used to do this. We used to ask questions about whether immigrants supported constitutional government and individual rights. We stopped doing it because it became politically incorrect.
An attack on Jews in France a couple of years ago. There was an African black immigrant who protected them. This is the story of an individual who decided to lean into empathy and decency and compassion and squared off against two individuals who were radicalized, we don't know how, and saw Jews as the target through their dehumanization. There are 1.7 billion Muslim people on Earth. Jillian's talking points are from 2001, which is why I yawned. The DeLorean right now is in 2025. Listen, I've been in this for a long time, Jillian. I know you're just discovering this. Congratulations.
I think I've also...
Let me just finish. Okay, I let you say a lot of hateful, stupid, reckless things about Muslim Islam. I sat there and,
would you like to say one?
I just sat there.
That's 20 million people.
Jillian, you are
you still
by
have
your own
16
admission.
dead,
You by your own admission are a white nationalist. You by your own admission, that's what you are, a white nationalist. You admitted it.
I'm a white
I saw the
you know,
clip.
I'm Arab, right?
The number
I'm
one
Syrian and Lebanese and Turkish.
Okay, you're the one who said it. I didn't say it. That's why I was shocked. Jill, let me just finish.
When did I say I was a white nationalist?
You're not a white nationalist?
When was that?
There was a... Okay, wasn't there a clip that saying you were a white nationalist? You're not a white nationalist.
No.
Okay, interesting. Interesting to know. All right.
Where's the clip that I said I was a white nationalist?
I'm under the mistaken impression. I thought you were a white nationalist. I'm glad you're not. But let me just finish. Okay. Since 2001, Piers, you and I on this
nationalist.
panel. You and I on this panel.
How about a little homework, Wajahat? How about just a little?
All right, let's do homework. Let's do homework. Since 2001, Piers, since 2001, you and me, we were against the war on terror. We said that the war on terror would be disastrous. We said that the war on terror, America's response to 19 foreign hijackers bringing down the two towers would be would cause immense chaos, dissension. What happened? America went to war with Iraq and Afghanistan off of terrible evidence, off of the same type of bullshit that Jillian's saying right now. If even 1% of Muslims, yada, yada, yada. What happened?
It's over all fact-based.
1 million
you want me to
Iraqis
cite the
were
resources?
Killed. Over
Where would
1
you
million
like me
Iraqis
to start?
were killed. Just, Jillian, let me finish. Over 1 million Iraqis were killed.
Counterterrorism discourse intelligence estimate.
And it led to the radicalization
of ISIS. Court of Human Rights.
It brought nothing but pain and misery and division. Muslims, Jews aren't going anywhere, folks. We're in this together. And what we have to realize is that there are hate mongers who seek to divide us right now, like Jillian, who want to bring up Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, who want to get rid of all Muslim immigrants.
I said, all Wajahat, you're the one actually who has tried to divide us. And your rant this past week.
We have to make a future together. We have to call out the hate. We have to call out the white supremacy, the Islamic extremism, the Jewish supremacy.
How do you address?
We have to call out the terrorism. We have to call out
the people that want to destroy the West.
We have to call out Israel's occupation. We have to call it Israel's occupation and genocide, and we have to call out Hamas
the percentage
and violent extremism.
Of radical Islam that wants to destroy the West.
Let me bring in Roland.
Just tell me how to address that,
Roland. Let me bring in Roland.
Piers,
you don't have an answer, do you?
Piers, Jillian, I've had to sit here and listen to y'all go back and forth. Can I please make this point?
Please.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Piers. Yes. Last week I was in Montgomery, Alabama, for the 7th anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott. And there is a National Memorial for Peace and Justice and Legacy Museum there that documents, that commemorates the documented 4,400 lynchings in this country. And there were more that took place. As an African American, when I understand what it means when you have a people who have a bullseye on their back, who are being targeted. I understand that. And so it is absolutely shameful that you cannot be at a Hanukkah celebration.
And this right here is exactly what happens every single time. Wajahat comes in, and instead of addressing anything Jillian just said, instead of engaging with the statistics, or the questions about assimilation, or the documented terror attacks, he goes straight to personal attack mode. He calls her hateful. He calls her stupid. He calls her reckless. But here's the part that should make everyone pay attention. He then accuses Jillian of admitting to being a white nationalist. He says it multiple times. You, by your own admission, are a white nationalist. And Jillian very calmly asks, when did I say that? And you know what Wajahat does? He backtracks immediately. He says, oh, interesting. Interesting to know. Like he is discovering new information. But he just accused her of it. On a major platform, in front of millions of people. This is the playbook. When you cannot win the argument on facts, when you cannot counter the statistics, when you cannot address the legitimate concerns about ideology and assimilation, you call someone a bigot, you call them a nationalist, you call them hateful and stupid and reckless. And most people will back down because nobody wants to be called those things. But notice Jillian does not back down. She does not apologize. She does not try to prove she is not racist. She just asks the simple question, when did I say that? Because she knows she never said it. And everyone watching knows she never said it. What she said was that 90% of Muslims are peaceful people and 10% represents a massive security concern. That is not white nationalism. That is risk assessment. And I want to talk about why this matters beyond just this one exchange. When you shut down conversations like this, when you make it impossible to discuss immigration policy or cultural compatibility or the theological roots of extremism without being called a bigot, you do not make the problem go away. You just make it so nobody can talk about solutions in public. And that does not protect Muslim immigrants who want to integrate. It actually makes life harder for them because the backlash builds up silently. There is a reason why polls show that large majorities of people in Western countries want stricter immigration controls. It is not because everyone suddenly became racist. It is because they watched 25 years of terror attacks and watched their governments tell them they were bigots for noticing patterns. They watched communities refuse to integrate. They watched parallel legal systems get set up in their own countries. And when they tried to bring it up, they got shouted down, just like Jillian is getting shouted down right here. You want to know why populist movements keep winning elections? This is why. Because regular people see someone like Jillian trying to have a fact-based conversation about immigration and assimilation, and they see people like Wajahat respond with name-calling and false accusations, and they think, okay, if this is what happens when you try to have this conversation politely, then maybe we need someone who will not be polite about it.
Interrupted by mass violence because of two evil individuals. But I'm saying two evil individuals for a reason. Because under the legitimate FBI leadership of Christopher Wray, they said that the greatest threat in America is white domestic terrorism. So when I listen to people like Senator Tommy Tuberville talk about, getting rid of all Muslims in this country, as an African American, I then say, well, what about white Christians? Because when we look at violence in this country, mass shootings in this country, who typically commits them? And so I think anybody has to be very careful to not go down this path of, oh my God, all of them, when I, as an African American, who's also, Jillian, please allow me to finish. When I, as an African American, who's also a Christian, can literally look at the history of white Christians committing violence. And so what we cannot do is say, oh, it is the religion that's driving it, as opposed to it is these evil individuals. Piers, you properly talked about guns and how Australia, after that mass shooting, you said in the 90s, how they targeted. But the fact that they were successful should be a lesson to America. How about you also try that to deal with mass shootings in this country? And so it is wrong for us to go down this path of condemning an entire religion, condemning an entire group of people, whether they are Muslim, whether they are Jewish, whether they are Christian. What we have to recognize is there are evil people in this world, and our job is to root out evil and then how they impact people. But it's crazy to attack an entire religion and target all those people.
I agree with that. And look, Emily made the same point earlier because we were talking about it.
Senator Tommy Tuberville.
Yeah, but Emily.
Randy Fine.
Emily, here's the reality about.
Guys.
Here's the reality about United States, for example. You have roughly the same number of Jews and Muslims in the United States. It's about 4 or 5 million of each, right? In the UK, by comparison, there are as many Muslims in the UK as there are in the whole of America, but there are only 250,000 Jews. There's a massively disproportionate scenario in my country, which is why I think Jews in the UK and in London in particular feel particularly threatened when they see these large marches every weekend with people often brazenly taunting the Jewish community, or supporting Hamas or talking about a global intifada, whatever it may be. And we saw the same thing happening in Australia. And I do think it's really incumbent on governments that they have to clamp down on this openly threatening stuff in the streets towards Jewish people. Today's show is sponsored by Oxford Natural, makers of the Optimum Day and Optimum Night all-natural supplements. Thousands of Brits and Americans are already taking them with incredible results. Optimum Day boosts your energy and supports weight loss throughout the day. Optimum Night helps you relax and get deep, refreshing sleep. They have countless success stories, including from some very familiar faces. England legend Michael Owen, who lost 40 pounds, AFTV's Robbie, who lost more than 100 pounds. To watch their full stories and many more, scan the QR code on your screen or visit oxfordnatural.com/Piers. And here's the best part. Use the code Piers and get 70% off your first order. Yes, 70% off with the code Piers.
Yeah,
So Roland comes in here and brings up the FBI statistic about white domestic terrorism being the greatest threat in America. And I actually want to address this because it gets used a lot to shut down conversations about extremism from other sources. And here is what people need to understand about that statistic. Yes, the FBI under Christopher Wray did categorize domestic violent extremism as a top threat. But when you break down what they mean by that category, it includes everything from anti-government militias to environmental extremists to white supremacists to black separatist groups. It is a huge umbrella category, and the way it gets used in these debates is to suggest that Islamic terrorism is not a significant concern anymore, which is simply not accurate. The difference is this. Domestic extremism in America tends to be decentralized and ideologically scattered. You have individuals radicalized online, acting alone. It is absolutely a threat, and law enforcement should focus on it. But international terrorism from extremist networks has shown the capacity for coordinated mass casualty attacks in ways that domestic extremism has not matched since Oklahoma City. And here is the part that I think gets lost. You can care about both. You can want law enforcement to focus on neo-Nazi groups and want better screening for immigrants who might be radicalized. These are not mutually exclusive concerns. But what happens in these debates is that any discussion of one gets used to shut down discussion of the other. When Roland says we cannot condemn entire religions or entire groups of people, he is absolutely right. Piers agrees with him. Jillian would agree with him. Nobody on that panel is saying all Muslims are dangerous. What Jillian is saying is that we need to be able to discuss the percentage that is dangerous without getting accused of hating everyone. And this connects to something really important about how we used to think about immigration in the West. The idea was never that you could only come here if you looked a certain way or prayed to a certain god. The idea was that you come here, you adopt the values of constitutional government and individual liberty and equality under law, and you become part of the society. That is what assimilation meant. But somewhere along the way, we decided that even asking people to embrace those values was somehow oppressive. We decided that maintaining distinct parallel cultures was not just acceptable, but preferable. And now, we are dealing with the consequences of that. Because when you have communities that do not integrate, when you have second and third generation immigrants who feel more connected to the ideology of their grandparents' homeland than to the country they were born in, you create the conditions for radicalization. What Jillian is trying to do here is have an honest conversation about that. And the fact that she gets called hateful and stupid and a white nationalist for even bringing it up tells you everything about why we cannot solve this problem. We cannot fix what we cannot discuss. And right now, in most of the West, we cannot discuss this. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.